Hi, this is Bethany with Recherche Kennels, and today I'm going to talk to you about resource guarding. Now, resource guarding is a typical behavior where your dog has found something of value, and this can be a variety of things, that they have decided to control, that this is something that they have decided to guard, and this can manifest itself in many different ways. So I'm going to talk to you a lot about resource guarding today, as well as some ways to resolve that issue. There are three main types of resource guarding. There's a dominant behavior, you can have true resource guarding, or you can have an insecure behavior. Now, if a dominant behavior is causing resource guarding, this is going to look very differently, and this is going to be definitely something that you want to resolve very quickly and with the help of a professional. If you are dealing with true resource guarding is something that you probably will not see in one of our adults or puppies, because true resource guarding is where your dog has been deprived of something at some point in their life. If you have a rescue dog, that's where you're generally going to see the true resource guarding. They've been deprived of just basic necessities such as food and water. Therefore, they need to possess those things as a self-preservation behavior. And then another common reason for resource guarding is an insecure behavior. And this is very typical in a soft, calmer, maybe a little more of a fearful dog or puppy. And so this is a behavior where they're not completely confident, they're not completely comfortable in an environment, and so they feel the need to possess something that they may feel like that they may lose. Now, some factors into resource guarding are living environment, personality, and behavior traits. Now, your living environment makes a huge difference and causes a large factor into resource guarding. If you have an environment where your puppy is a little more out of control, maybe they have a little less structure, a little less training, and you're a little less controlling in that entire environment, maybe with food, maybe with toys, maybe even with playtime and affection, that's where you will start to see a lot more of those guarding behaviors, those resource guarding. Now, we have created a video called Creating Structure in Your Home. You will find that in our blog section. I highly recommend watching that video and following those protocols if you are seeing this behavioral issue in your home. Now, the other factors being personality and behavior traits. If you are dealing with a more confident puppy or adult dog, if you're dealing with a dog that's very forward moving, then this may be a dominant behavior. This may be something that you're seeing out of dominance versus insecurity. Whereas if you are dealing with that softer tempered puppy, you're dealing with that softer tempered adult, they're a little softer, a little more fearful, that's where you have those insecure behaviors. So it's very, very important when diagnosing resource guarding, it's important to look at the personality traits and the behavior of the dog and or puppy in front of you, so that we're making sure that we are picking the right temperament, the right behavior to go with that personality, so we're fixing that in the right way. Now, you may ask yourself, what can dogs guard? Now, there are many things that your dog can guard, and a lot of these things are often overlooked. The number one thing that people expect to see their dog guard is food. Food is something that your dog is required to have to live, so this is something that we would expect them to be a little more possessive of. Some other things that you would expect to see your dog guard would be toys, bones, things of high value. This is often a common thing that dogs guard. This is something that is very easy to work on as well. They can also guard other objects. It doesn't have to specifically be toys or food. It may be an object that they have found on the floor that they have decided is of value to them. If you have a dog, especially that likes to pick up things in the home that they're not supposed to have, run around with them, this is another thing that they can guard. It can be a sock, it can be a piece of lint on the floor. So it doesn't always have to just be something that it already belongs to them. Other things that your dog can guard is space. You may have a dog, if they're especially controlling in your environment, where there's a certain area of the floor that they have decided belongs to them. Maybe there's a certain room or furniture. Furniture is also something that's very common for dogs to guard. It's something of value. It also puts them at an elevated level. Therefore, at that elevated level, they feel a lot stronger than they might on the floor. This is also another reason that we recommend not allowing them on furniture. Some dogs are very capable of handling that amount of control, that amount of value, but some dogs are not capable of this. If you never allow on furniture, then that's something that you're never going to have to deal with. Now, another thing that dogs can guard, and this is often the most overlooked things that dogs will guard, is people. This is a behavior that people often view as a protective behavior. If you have a dog that's laying with you, you have a dog especially that's sitting on your lap, and they may growl whenever someone or another dog walks up. The instant thought is, oh, they're protecting me. They are making sure that nothing bad happens to me. When in reality, this is absolutely not the case. What they are doing is they are seeing you as an object. You are something of value to them, such as a toy or a bone. This is a behavior that's very, very unsightly and something that we definitely would recommend that you correct very, very quickly and as soon as you see that behavior. Because that behavior is often misguided, it's a behavior that's not often diagnosed properly, it's a behavior that gets unconsciously rewarded and can be a very dangerous behavior. So that's something that you would definitely want to work with a professional very quickly to resolve that behavior. Now, what does resource guarding look like? This is very, very important. It's important to know what these behaviors look like, so therefore you know what you're looking at, especially when you're looking at your dog, if you think you may be approaching a problematic behavior. Now, there are many signs that lead up to resource guarding, and this is an escalating behavior. It's generally going to start out very small, and you may not notice it until it's already very problematic. So the first sign that you're going to look for in resource guarding is avoidance. Now what this looks like is essentially if your dog has an object or a toy, something of value that they like, that they want to continue to possess. If you reach for that item, or maybe another dog comes up for that item and they turn their head, they may turn their entire body, they may even grab that item, get up and walk away. This is an avoidance behavior. Now this is the first sign of an escalating behavior. If your dog does this every time you walk to them and they have something of value, or every time another dog walks up to them, they are doing the right thing as far as removing themselves from the situation, but that's not going to resolve that behavior. Now the second sign of that escalating behavior is a freezing behavior. If you reach for an item that your dog has, or once again, another dog walks by and they grab that item, they may tighten that item in their mouth, they may pick it up, or even move their entire body over that item and they stiffen up. They get very still, they freeze. That's a big sign that you want to look for. That means that they are thinking about what that next move is. Now the next move up from that freezing behavior is generally going to be a growl. It's going to be a verbal sound, and this is their way of communication. A big issue and a big mistake that a lot of people make is they start to correct that growling behavior. You want to keep in mind that dogs can't talk. They're always going to speak with their body first, and then they're going to start to give you those verbal noises. They're going to let you know, hey, I'm really uncomfortable with what you're doing, and that they're really unhappy with what you're doing. So just the general consensus is to correct the growling. The growling is a bad behavior. However, if you correct that growling behavior, then they're going to lose out on one of those signs that they need to have to communicate with you. So instead of correcting that growling behavior, if you start to get to that point, I definitely recommend going to a professional, getting some help from someone that can look at that situation and see what's happening. Because the next step from that growling is going to be one that you definitely do not want to see. That's going to be showing teeth. That's going to be showing a snarling behavior. They're going to be letting you know that they mean business. That's something that they're not playing anymore. It's something that they're going to let you know that the next step is going to be a little more ugly. Because following up from that growling to that snarling behavior, the next is snapping at you. And especially if your dog is escalating in this behavior, they're learning that it works for them. If your dog growls at you and you back away, they've just learned that that's the right thing to do. If the growling no longer works and maybe gets corrected, the next behavior may be a snarl or a snap, and that's definitely going to get you to move away from them. At that point, this is going to become a very learned behavior. It's going to be even harder to correct at that point. So the first signs of seeing those resource guarding, you're definitely going to want to work with a professional, but we're going to talk to you a little bit about some things that you can do at home before you get to that point. Now, resolving resource guarding can be complex as this behavior did not start overnight. This is something that has generally progressed over time. So therefore, it's not going to be resolved in one day. This is something that's going to take many steps, but you can also prevent this from happening. So I'm going to give you some little things that you can do in your home, especially with your puppy, to prevent resource guarding from ever becoming an issue. Now, one thing that we really recommend is creating a trade system. If your puppy never learned to guard a toy, an object, anything from you, then it's never going to become an issue. So we like to recommend practicing with toys, practicing with food, practicing with bones, anything of high value. So for instance, if I'm feeding my puppy their breakfast, I will put that food down, allow them to eat that food, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to reach my hand in there and I'm going to see how they respond to that. Do they eat faster? If they eat faster, I'm going to verbally correct. I'm going to tell them, hey, that's not an appropriate behavior. What I'm also going to do is I'm going to have a high value reward. We like to use cut up hot dogs as something that's easier on their stomach. It's also a very high value. It has a very different smell and texture. So if that puppy reacts negatively, I'm going to tell them, I'm going to let them know that that's not appropriate. And then whenever they react appropriately, I'm going to take a handful of those hot dogs and I'm going to toss it into that food bowl. So what that puppy is learning is that every time I come close to their bowl, something good happens. I should be able to reach into that bowl. I should be able to take that bowl away, give them a hot dog, and then return that bowl to them. What I never want them to learn is that I'm going to take something away from them indefinitely. If they react negatively and I take that food bowl away, they've just learned that they need to react that way. That maybe they need to react stronger because I'm gonna take that away. I don't ever want a puppy to learn that behavior. Or you can even do this with an adult dog. If you have an adult dog, go ahead and walk by that food bowl, drop a few treats in. What they will begin to see is that whenever you get close, you're gonna give something even better than what's in that bowl. You can also practice hand feeding your puppy or your adult dog. This is a great way to take the bowl out of the equation. Some dogs do learn to guard that bowl, like we talked about guarding an object. So take that out of the equation, start to hand feed a little bit. You can scatter some food on the floor. Do things so that they are not directly associating food with that bowl. Now, if you have a dog that likes to grab objects and run away in the home with them, Another big issue that can happen as a result of resource guarding is they may swallow that object. They want to retain that object so badly that they are going to swallow it in order to keep it. So you definitely don't want that to happen. That can cause some very, very dangerous health issues as well as potential surgeries. So if you have a dog that's more prone, or a puppy, to picking things up in the floor, instead of correcting that behavior, instead of chasing after them, trying to drag and dig that out of their mouth, call them to you, trade them out. Once again, use that high value reward whenever they come to you. Take whatever object that is that they have, offer that food reward, and once again, do that trade system. What your puppy will learn is that by bringing you something, whether they are supposed to have it or not, they are going to get something in return. It's also teaching them that that game is with you and that you are in control of that situation. If your dog gets something they're not supposed to have and you chase after them, they've just learned that they are in control of that situation. They can manipulate you into doing what they want you to do. So you never want that to become an issue. So anytime they're picking up those bad objects, whether it be a sock on the floor, a piece of lint, anything that they're not supposed to have, maybe it's a piece of paper, go ahead, call them to you, give that food reward, and take away that bad object. Therefore, you're not just taking something away without giving something in return. Now, the same also applies to playing with toys. We're often asked if tug is a behavior that we allow. This is not something that we want to create a habit out of, because once again, that's teaching your dog to retain those objects. So you want to make sure that if you put your hand on something that they have, they willingly give that up. And that's something that we teach all of our puppies here at Recherche. If we reach for whatever object they have, they give that up, and then we're going to give them something positive in return, keeping those high value motivators with you. And this is a behavior that if you create it as a puppy, you're never going to have those big bad behavioral issues whenever they get older. So continuing that trade system even into adulthood is really, really important. And then continuing to create structure in your home. I recommend not giving a lot of free access to toys. You can give toys at your leisure, but then don't leave those out all the time. You can pick those up and then give them when you decide. Once again, make sure that that game is with you. Continuing that structure in your home, not allowing on furniture. If you allow them on furniture, that's where you can begin to give too much space and you give too much freedom. Then your puppy doesn't know how to handle that freedom. So creating that structure, if they're being super pushy with you, make them give you space. They're not allowed to guard your space. They're not allowed to be demanding. Those demanding behaviors are generally the behaviors that turn into very unsightly problems whenever they get older. Now, if you are dealing with resource guarding already as an issue, if you have a dog that's already showing these problematic signs, I'm also going to give you some things to work on with that. Now, one thing is to control resources. I just talked about with a puppy, don't leave your toys all over the floor, but if you have an adult dog that's already having these behavioral issues, control those resources. Do not give free access. If your dog is struggling with giving something of too high value, so if you give a bone and maybe that's too much, but they don't guard certain toys, don't give that item that they can guard. Don't give that item that they feel that they are incapable of having that self-control, that they want to continually retain that typical toy, bone, whatever that may be. Don't give those items until you have resolved this behavior. Now, if you start to work on this behavior and it's becoming extinguished, then you may be able to begin to introduce that, but not until you have controlled those resources. You can also play that trade game with your adult dog to help with this behavior, but it's generally not going to resolve it if it's already an issue. Also, limiting the ability to react is very, very important. So if you have a dog that's guarding the sofa, remove their access to that. Let them know that, hey, you no longer have that space of value. Once again, putting them anywhere elevated can also give them the mindset of they're bigger, they're taller, they're face to face with you. You often hear people tell you, don't get down in the dog's face, but by allowing that dog on an elevated structure, you're putting yourself eye to eye with them. Therefore, they are seeing themselves of the same level as you. So if you have a dog that's controlling your bed, if you try to get in your bed and your dog growls at you, and this is also very common if you have someone that lives with you, if you have a spouse or a significant other, you will find that if the dog is laying in bed with someone and you go to get in that bed, the dog may growl at you. And that's where they are guarding their space as well as potentially guarding that other person as a resource. So remove that. If you have a dog that's struggling with guarding the sofa, guarding a bed, start to crate them. If you say, well, whenever I'm not home, they get on the couch. Crate them. Take away the ability to make those decisions for themselves. If they're guarding toys, if they're guarding bones, don't leave them anymore. They're not allowed to have those things until they can react appropriately to them. Now, if your dog is guarding food, once again, you can practice those things that I just mentioned about walking up, dropping those treats in that bowl, giving them something positive. But if this behavior has escalated to something that could be a little more dangerous for you, I highly recommend feeding in the crate until you're able to have a professional come out and help you. Now, this is a behavior that will need to be corrected. This behavior is not going to go away on its own. However, those corrections are going to be dependent on what type of resource guarding you're dealing with. So if this is something that you have seen, this is something that you're having an issue with, and you want to correct this behavior, I would highly recommend reaching out to a professional, someone that could come in, put eyes on the behavior, because while you can ask someone and you can give all the details, there may be something very small that you are missing, and something that maybe we would even miss if we're not hands-on, if we're not looking at that behavior. So that's really important. If you are looking at correcting this behavior, go ahead and have someone come in, evaluate that situation, and then they will be able to give you the proper tools and management for that resource guarding behavior. Now, resource guarding can be a very complex behavior. We hope that all the information that we have given you helps you better understand your dog's behavior and what they are trying to tell you. We hope that you enjoyed this video, and thank you so much.